The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you. With you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello. Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, just please take your seat above us. We're with you. It's time to take off. Start. 2, 1. Boost to ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Tuesday, June 20th. Wednesday, June 21st, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. Hope you've had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are live 7 days a week. Let's welcome in everyone listening in on our terrestrial stations. WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com. Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station funded by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Horns up if you love our music from the guitar god himself, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Now, if you're a social media junkie like I am, you can follow me on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on Player.fm, RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and Stitcher. Our website is SpacedOutRadio.com. And if you go to Patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of SOR as well. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. I need you to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on our website by going to clicking Listen Live, or on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, or maybe join up on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. I see Rahonda, Canadian Joe, Andrew in there. Christoph is in there as well. Good to have you along for the ride tonight. If you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. And as of right now, go to our store, pick up a t-shirt, a poster, a sticker or two. You can also get VIP passes for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, happening September 29th to October 1st. VIP tickets are on sale right now for 10% off on our website. That event is being held in the 108 Mile Ranch of British Columbia, right where Spaced Out Radio resides, at the beautiful Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. It's a weekend getaway you do not want to miss. Also on our website, we have the Encounter Online, dealing with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editors Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You can check out my latest blog there as well, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Washington State is a strange and beautiful place, but it does have its secrets. Secrets that the public knows about and even acknowledges, but really doesn't do anything about the search for answers. Whether it's Bigfoot in the Cascade Mountains hiding away like the hide-and-seek champion he is, or being the home of the term flying saucer 70 years ago when it was created, or better yet, the home of mainstream coffee, computer technology, grunge music, Jimi Hendrix, or corporate aircraft, there always seems to be something going on in and around the Emerald City, Seattle. Since settlers first arrived in Washington State, it's been a haunted place. From the ghosts of the underground tunnels to the ghosts of musicians and sailors looking for the fishing riches off the Pacific, the spirits are everywhere. Tonight, we have Ross Allison back on with us to talk about haunted Seattle and Washington State. Ross runs the Spooked and in Seattle Ghost Tours and writes the Angry Ghost Hunter blog. He's an avid investigator with more than 20 years' experience in the paranormal with the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle and Tacoma. And with all that, he even runs a museum of haunted items. Ross, where do you find time for all this? Welcome to Spaced Out Radio again.
Well, thank you for having me. And where do I find the time? I don't know. It's a good question. God, I've just been lucky enough to have the opportunities to check out some of these amazing places. So for me, it's just been luck.
And in this field, anybody who can make some sort of living or eke out a living, it is luck. I mean, we're trying around here, and I know how hard it is personally. But what made you decide this was the career path, that you were going to say, to hell with the mainstream, and just focus on learning more and all you can about the field of the paranormal?
Well, for one, it started out with the passion for the paranormal. I grew up with a mother that loved ghost stories, so I would listen to these fascinating stories. And from there, I actually had moved to California and had the opportunity to work with some of the bigger names out there. And then when I moved back to Washington, I really wanted to get more involved in the paranormal, but at the time there weren't any ghost hunting groups. So I basically, started my own, and it really took off from there, being that we were the first, doing a lot of the paranormal research. I think a lot of, people were looking for us. And it just, it really took off. We started getting a lot of media attention, in some of the places we were investigating. And then, from there, I just started, really doing a lot of research and, working on, trying to recover some of the history of some of these places, and some of the amazing places we got to investigate in Seattle. And so with all these stories and all this amazing evidence that, we were collecting, it's like, somebody's got to do something with this. And, somebody had told me that, the best thing to do in the world of paranormal research is to get your stuff published. You really do, because then the stories are forever. They don't get forgotten. And so I thought, you're right. I really need to focus on getting this stuff out there so that, once I expire, the next person, after me can take over and continue, some of these stories and not, lose the evidence that we've been collecting. So from that, I actually started Spooked in Seattle. And with Spooked in Seattle Ghost Tours, I was able to continue to tell these stories and share the evidence that we'd collected. And it was just, from there, I started getting, asked to do lectures, and then the lectures, really took off. And it's just like I found myself not having time to have a 9-to-5 job and focusing more on the paranormal. And that's where I am today, the only full-time ghost hunter in the Pacific Northwest.
How fun is that? How fun is having that title? Because you know what? The good part about it is when you're number one, it's easier to get the attention. It's easier to get those stories when the newscasters are looking for someone to talk to about Halloween or something spooky. You're the guy they contact. How does that feel to be the first guy on the block?
Well, it's amazing, in some ways, and then it's got its challenges as well. If you would have, called me up, 20 years earlier and said, "Hey, Ross, this is going to be your career," I probably would have laughed at you. It's like, really? No way. But, now that I've, stepped into the field and have made a name for myself, it is amazing that, people come to me, for advice and want to know, what could be going on, and having the opportunities to investigate some amazing places. But, media is not always the greatest thing either. Media could be your best friend or your worst enemy. So, sometimes being in the limelight, as they say, it can always, they can always tear you down as well. You become a target.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I know that all too well, my friend. All too well being on this side of the microphone. What made you get into this field? Was it an experience as a kid? You mentioned a little bit that your mom had always told you ghost stories and everything like that. But did you have your own experiences as a child that led you down this road? Or was it just the amazing stories mom used to teach you maybe at a campfire or just before bed? What was that like for you?
I always have to go to my mother. She is an amazing storyteller. So, I think that's a talent I kind of picked up from her. So just that fascination, that curiosity. Are people really experiencing this stuff? This can't be happening. So, I was one of the rare people in the field of paranormal research, because when I got involved, most people involved in ghost hunting had experiences, and they wanted to rekindle those experiences or find answers to those experiences. I was kind of the odd man out, because I never had those experiences. I was just envious of people that would tell me their experiences and go, "Oh my God, why has that not happened to me?" So, for me, it was just purely that curiosity.
And with that curiosity, when you finally decided to jump both feet in research, were you surprised to learn how many spirits are truly out there, or how many places are actually haunted?
Oh, yeah. And that all started when I started doing my research in Pioneer Square, Seattle. Now, Pioneer Square is the, historic part of Seattle. It's where, Seattle was founded from. And, I've been all over the U.S., to some of the most haunted places. And I was still surprised that, with Seattle being as young as it is, we're just over 150 years old, compared to something on the East Coast, that I was still able to come up with, a massive amount of stories that would lead to, the success of Spooked in Seattle Ghost Tours.
So, being that Seattle is only about 150 years old and Vancouver is around the same age, actually, and, it's very interesting. Actually, Canada is 150 this year, to be
awesome.
To be perfectly honest, and mm-hmm. That isn't a very rich history if you look, like you say, on the East Coast when the settlers first got here, right, 300-400 years ago. And I had the privilege last month of actually being in Provincetown, Massachusetts for a wonderful Paracon out there in Provincetown where the Pilgrims first landed. And I can tell you, the energy around there was intense and insane. And do you feel that around Seattle? Is the energy that thick with spirit? Or is it something where, if you go to the older parts, or you go down by the docks, or it's the tunnels, specific areas is what I'm getting at that are more haunted than others?
It's really hard, to say in that situation, because every, major city has its fair share of history, especially when it comes to tragic history. We've all gone through our troubles and trials. And when it comes to that, we believe that is the main resource for ghosts, because of the hardships that a lot of these people had to go through, murders, suicides, and even illegal, events. So, granted, yes, Seattle has its fair share of troubled history. We went through, prostitution, legal gambling, opium dens. In fact, one of the things that, we're more notorious for is the fact that we got away with it for much longer because we paid off the local police. The police would actually look away, and you could get away with doing illegal activities. So, comparing Seattle to the East Coast is, again, comparing, apples to oranges. It's granted, East Coast has more history. But again, even for a newer city, even, Vancouver, it's a situation where we still have a fair share of what could be the essence for starting a haunting. So, feeling the energies, I don't know. I've even been to Europe and some of the most, notorious haunted castles where history even goes even further than America. And it's still amazing, but it still all gets down to being at the right place at the right time. Even when you're in one of the oldest places in the world, you're not guaranteed to have an experience with the paranormal. So it's really hard to say, which is more haunted than the other. Again, it all comes from the experience and having those opportunities to encounter, the phenomena that people claim. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. And we're going to get more into Seattle tonight as we get to in-depth to some of the stories that you have and the collection of haunted memorabilia that you have as well. But one of the things I want to talk about with you is you're someone who's been doing this for more than 2 decades now. When you look at where you started in Seattle as the only paranormal investigative team there, and you compare it to what you see today with the popularity of paranormal research, What do you like about it, and what do you not like about it?
Well, that takes me into the whole reason why I started writing the Angry Ghost Hunter blog, is the fact that, there's so many challenges nowadays. It's, the situation where, back in the day when, I was calling myself a paranormal investigator, we were still kind of in the closet. People would still kind of look at you odd if you had even mentioned that. And now today, you can proudly wave your ghost hunter flag, and, people will cheer you on and say you're amazing. Oh my God, how do you do this? So yeah, it's changed quite a bit, but not always for the better. As they say, when you got too many cooks in the kitchen, it's obviously has caused a lot of drama in the field. Where now it's so easy for somebody to claim the title ghost hunter or paranormal investigator, or whatever title you feel fit. It's a situation where now, it's so easy. I can just, grab a camera, grab an EMF detector and say, hey, I'm a ghost hunter. Let's do some ghost hunting. And very few of these groups, have the knowledge to pursue this field in the right way. There's so many groups out there that are just imitating what they see on TV, and it becomes clearly monkey see, monkey do. And there's so much being missed. There's so many protocols not being followed. In fact, the biggest problem that we have in the field of paranormal research is we don't have a baseline protocol. Everybody's doing their own thing. And so when it comes to the point where somebody submits evidence, we're all going to question it because we do not know how this group operates. We do not know how they've collected that evidence. And that's where a lot of these, groups get into fights with each other because, you believe you have something amazing. You submit it, but everybody starts to tear it down. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Well, that's all because we don't have a standard when it comes to paranormal investigating. And it just leads to so many fights and jealousy and territorial issues. It's become a problem. It really has. And I really hope that, by being out there and being more vocal, that I can help to come up with ways to fix the solution, It's great that there's a lot of people out there that want to be involved in the paranormal, but really people have to figure out what and why they want to do this. Well, because there's so many different elements to this as well.
You know what? I can honestly say, Ross, if you need anybody's help from Spaced Out Radio to help you put that together, we are game. We talk about this topic ad nauseum, that there is no rule book. And yes, other teams have set up the rule book. TAPS has done a great job in influencing their thousands of members. Other groups have done it as well with a code of conduct. And there are some that got it right. There are some that don't have a clue when it comes to what is going on. How do you find that balance? And is it too late? Because in reality, ghost hunting these days, doesn't matter where you are, it's anarchic. I know there's one team in British Columbia here that makes public places sign contracts with them that they are the only one allowed to investigate the paranormal there.
That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Because one of the things that I've always told people, clients especially, if you're going to have a team investigate your property, it's always good to have another team investigate as well. It's like going to the doctor. You don't always go to one doctor to get, a diagnosis. You sometimes have to go to multiple doctors to get a better idea of what's happening. And what it does is by having multiple teams investigate your property, you can find the commonality in a lot of their investigations. And when they come up with similar evidence. So all it does is it builds credibility for the client themselves when they're claiming there's something happening, and for the teams individually when they can go in and both walk away with similar evidence and say, hey, we're on the right track. So it's absolutely wrong for teams to get territorial. I don't understand why they would want to be so jealous, because a lot of times we don't always have the opportunity to return to some of these places and give them the necessary time that they need to prove their claims. As we know, it's all about being at the right place at the right time. So why not have another team go in when you can't and say, hey, here's another opportunity. Maybe they might get something. But then again, it all gets back down to that jealousy, because if my team goes in and they don't get anything, and then another team goes in and they get something, it's like, oh, wait a minute. It's ridiculous. It really is. So it's one of those things that, we need to, I hate to say it, all grow up, and step forward and be, adults and educate everybody in this field. If you really want to pursue this. Another thing that really upsets me is when groups do start out and they immediately go right into clients' homes. That's the worst, because then they just cause so much more problems because they don't know what they're doing. And they cause problems for the clients as well. If you're a new group starting out and you're not really sure what you're doing, go to, stay the night in a haunted hotel. Go check out your local cemetery. Do some of the public places that are well-known haunted. Don't get involved with clients. So,
well,
I can go on.
No. I think this is creating really good conversation here in regards to it, because everybody jumps into the fact, and whether or not you want to blame TV or YouTube, Facebook Live, the one thing that always amazes me, Ross, is how many people who you've never heard of before have been doing this for 20 plus years, number one, and number two, how somebody 25, 28 years old is a practicing demonologist, because there's demons everywhere as well. I just think, we all want the mainstream to take us seriously. Doesn't matter what we do. We want them to take this seriously. But because there is that lack of rules and really no one to govern it, is it impossible right now for anybody to take what we do seriously if we continue to shoot ourselves in our own foot?
Yeah, I really do. Because the fact of the matter is we, even as a society, we all can't come together. Look at, politics today. We can't come together and decide what's best for us. And it's going to be a constant battle. Yes, there will be a significant amount of groups that will come together and learn from each other, because that's what we have to do. We have to learn from each other. We have to learn from our mistakes. And by learning from our mistakes, we're creating shortcuts for the next generation to come in. So, the fact of the matter is people don't realize this. It's all trial and error when it comes to ghost hunting. We go in with ideas and we hope to capture the phenomena to prove that there's something out there. And as I've always keep going back to, and again, you have to understand, it's all about being at the right place at the right time. So, it's going to be a huge challenge. But I think, as, certain individuals, even like, ghost hunters, that have come forward and have been in the limelight for, I think whether we're on for 13 years, I think. Anyways, but, they have, like you said, they came forward and, came up with some standards for us. But a lot of the groups don't want to be public with what is working and what's not working for them, because they feel like they're holding on to some piece of golden evidence that's going to make them famous or wealthy. And so they don't want to share how they got it or what protocols they use. So again, that limits us. So, it's going to be, really will be a huge challenge for us, because again, there's too many people involved and too many people are, I hate to say it, egotistical, without naming names.
I know you're tight with your good friend David Weatherly, who will be a guest here on Friday. David seems to be loving this show and wanting to come on every second month, and this show loves him, so we're going to continue that relationship as well. And you were on with David once on this show. When you look at people such as him and others of that stature who are really trying to find the truth behind everything that is going on, do you think that it's possible to maybe start some sort of governing body for the paranormal across the United States or maybe North America that could really set a real, true set of rules and guidelines, that people have to follow? Because eventually, as more people become spiritual, as more people start to have their own experiences and open up, there has to be something that guides or governs. Do you think that's even possible, or maybe just a pipe dream?
I would love to see it happen. I really would. And that's something, I've been fighting for a long time, just by being, vocal and honest with you, with your public as well. It's a situation where, I would love to see something like that happen. I really would. And maybe, if we can all come together and kind of talk, about what's working for each of our teams, what's not working for each of our teams. I think definitely we could come up with a baseline for advancing us in ghost hunting. But then, we all have to understand that not everybody's going to follow the rules. And so that's where you have to also be strict about it too. If somebody's going to be a part of, whatever we want to name the society, the rules, you have to make sure that people are maintaining that as well. And that's a really hard thing to, I guess, to kind of watch over, who's following the rules, whose isn't. But yeah, I definitely feel that, yes, we need it. And we should, at least those who have been involved in this, for, 20 plus years, should all come together and talk about what's working for us.
So
yeah.
In your opinion then, if you were the man holding the conch and you had the way to set this up, what do you feel has to be done?
Well, there obviously, I think I would start with like some sort of website where we can all be able to communicate together. We need to all come together. We need to all submit our protocols. And then we need to be able to analyze each other's evidence too. So I think it's a situation where, I'm hoping that there'd be enough people involved in this field to be open and honest about, their claims, because, it's another downfall we have in society is there's so many people that are dishonest, and people follow, with these people that are dishonest, and all it does is it just adds more wrenches into the problems that we have in this field. So, for me, I would like, to start with some area where we can all come together and we can share and be able to, like, I always thought it'd be awesome to have some sort of website where, we could all submit our evidence to be analyzed, because we have to be able to sit down and debate whether this is legit paranormal or whether this could be explained. And that's another thing that, we fail to do, We don't have enough people being, I guess, I'm trying to think what the right word is without upsetting people. I guess being honest enough, because the problem we also have in this field is there's too much crap out there that's being labeled as paranormal evidence. There's too many devices out there that are being used to prove the paranormal that are just too suggestive. So we really have to get back to square one and determine what is true paranormal phenomena and what is suggestive, evidence.
Is there
so we really all...
Go ahead, please.
Well,
sorry.
I was just going to say, it just all goes down to the fact that we just have to strip things down to the bare minimum. You know, as I've always said to people, we got to go with what we know and not with what we think we know. And it all comes down to the fact that, too, there's a lot of groups out there that use the paranormal to prove the paranormal, and you can't do that.
I would agree with that. I would agree.
Back to your question.
So do you think there's enough people on the same page that we could get something like this started? Because for a lot of people, and I'll read Joe's answer here in the SOR Space Travelers Club, he says, you know, standardizing anything in the paranormal field will never happen because everyone has a different idea of what everything paranormal is.
Exactly.
So how do we find that common ground when there's so many differing opinions?
You know, and that's the challenge. It really is. The fact of the matter is, again, it all goes down to the individual and their belief system. You know, all these groups are operating at different levels and even different belief systems. You know, some groups will go out there with an EMF detector and a camera, and that's all they need, you know, and a recorder. That's all they need to prove that ghosts exist, you know. Then there are people out there that will go in there with, you know, tons of equipment. Like, you know, my team, we have thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment. And, you know, and we need more data. You know, what we've collected is not enough data. We want more. And then there's those groups out there that just don't need equipment. You know, they just got their psychic, you know, impressions, and that's enough for them to prove that ghosts exist. So, you know, it's a challenge. It really is. Because, again, it all goes back to what I said. We have to strip it down to the simplest form, you know, this bare naked truth to say, hey, what do we classify as paranormal? And that's where I think, you know, some of these great minds out there that hopefully would be willing to, you know, sit down and talk about it. But then you also have to consider the fact that where is their beliefs? You know, where do they stand? You know, because if you are a true believer, you don't need no proof. You know, if you are a skeptic, then obviously you're looking a little harder. All I do is I try to teach my team when they step into my group is we need to walk down the middle of the road, you know, and find out what's going on.
Absolutely. Let's start to shift our gears towards Seattle here. I mean, when you look at Seattle, you think of the Emerald City, a beautiful place tucked into the Pacific Northwest, Starbucks, Microsoft, Boeing, you name it. It is great. I mean, the 12th man with the Seattle Seahawks and baseball. Hopefully they'll get NHL hockey soon. At least that's my fingers being crossed, being the hockey fan that I am. Grunge music to Jimi Hendrix and Heart. I mean, it has a little bit of everything in that city. When you look at it, is it all just a cover-up of, say, what has happened over the last 30 years to clean up Seattle? Or is there a real underground of paranormal activity happening there?
Oh, there's definitely some strange things occurring here in Seattle. You know, when I started Spooked in Seattle tours, and I said, you know, I had started in, you know, the whole downtown area, the waterfront is where I originally started, and moved my way into Pioneer Square, which is the historic part of Seattle. I was surprised at how many claims of paranormal activity there were. You know, because like I said, you know, Seattle's still a very young city. And so I'm just amazed at what we've been able to collect in Seattle alone. You know, let alone, you know, what's going on throughout the state of Washington. So, yeah, I think, you know, Seattle has its every rights, you know, to claim to be one of the more haunted cities as well.
One of the topics that I wanted to discuss with you tonight is the underground. A lot of people don't know that Seattle is filled with tunnels that people claim to be haunted. Explain to us what the tunnels are.
Okay. Well, it's nothing like you probably saw on Night Stalker that show in the 70s where there was vampires living underground in Seattle, or what you might have seen on Scooby-Doo. The true story of the Seattle Underground is the fact that after Seattle was founded in 1862, what happened is basically the city had burned down, June 6, 1889. All right, and it burns down to the ground. And this is about 33 blocks at the time that Seattle had accumulated to at that time. So Seattle decides, okay, you know what, we want to rebuild. This time, we're going to use nothing but brick and iron because we don't want to burn down so quickly like we just did. So they start to rebuild their city. But the problem that they had was the fact that Seattle was originated at sea level and a lot closer to water. So they constantly had problems with flooding, with drainage, and even when plumbing came to Seattle, they had a strict problem with flushing crappers. All right, there was a rule that you could not flush your crapper at high tide. In fact, they even had in the local papers the times when high tide was going to happen. This is for the fact that if you had flushed your crapper at high tide, the water system would back up and gushers of sewage and salt water would shoot out of these crappers. Yeah, so it was not the perfect little city. So they even said that you could actually smell Seattle miles away before you actually reached it. That's how bad it was. So the city now has this opportunity to rebuild. And so what they want to do is they basically want to tear down the hills and cliffs that surround the area and use all that dirt to get the city above sea level. Because once they can get above sea level, it's going to fix all the drainage problems. And, other cities have done this, and they've been very successful. So Seattle's like, yeah, let's do this. Well, the business owners are like, yeah, that's a great idea. But they happen to ask one very important question. How long will that take? And so their answer was, well, 8 to 10 years. Now, 8 to 10 years, that's a long time to wait before you can start rebuilding your business. So none of the local businesses were going to wait that long. So they just decided to start rebuilding the day after the fire. So the buildings start to go up. And, the city officials are having a fit because all their plans are now being ruined. So they decide, okay, fine. Since we're only responsible for our city streets, what we're going to do is we're actually going to build walls around each and every block. Then we'll take the dirt and we will put it in between those walls. So what we're doing is we're raising our streets above the sidewalks. So at least the streets are now going to be over the sea level, and now they can run all the piping through the streets. Well, since they're running the piping through the streets, this makes it very difficult to connect all these city blocks. So now you have your sidewalk at sea level, but your street is now a good, 10 feet above your head, 10 to 15 feet above your head. So they had to figure out a way, well, how are people going to get around to the city? Well, here's a great idea. Why don't we put ladders at all four corners? So if you want to get around through our city, you basically have to go to the end of the block, go up a ladder, cross the street, and go down another ladder. Yeah, it was like that for 20 years. 20 years, the people of Seattle had to use ladders to get around through our city until they finally put in the sidewalks. So these newer sidewalks now are above the older sidewalks. So now what this has created is this tunnel that goes around the block. It's not like a big labyrinth like you would think. It's just a tunnel that goes around each and every block. So what happens is now these businesses have extended basements that basically go underneath the sidewalk. And so once, early 1900s came about, and basically prohibition happened, they started to use these now extended portions of the sidewalks for, illegal businesses because it was so easy to hide in them. You know, some businesses used them for dumping grounds. Other businesses used them to hide, bars in them so that people could sneak down there and drink during Prohibition. And, of course, opium dens, and most of all, prostitution. So for quite some time, Seattle undergrounds were used for all kinds of illegal things. Well, it wasn't until the plague epidemic happened, or scare, I should say, where I believe one gentleman believed to have come down with the plague, and so they freaked out, thinking that obviously it was coming from rats, fleas off of rats. And so what they did is they sealed off these underground sections for quite some time, until the 1970s, when a gentleman known as Bill Spidell had heard the stories of these underground tunnels. And he actually decided to research it. And sure enough, he found that there was all these extended basements in all these businesses throughout the Pioneer Square area of Seattle. And he was the one that actually launched the first underground tours. And then from there, you know, once people were getting access back into these underground sections, that's when people started having experiences. And then the stories started coming about. So, and then that's where I come into play. So that is a little bit of history of the Seattle Underground.
Well, I appreciate you breaking down the history, because that is fantastic for what we are talking about tonight. When I pictured the tunnels, I thought them to be more like in Portland with the Shanghai tunnels that are running all over the place, you know, to Shanghai sailors or Shanghai women to become prostitutes. I thought it was a lot more ugly and dark like that rather than the way you pictured it.
Well, it still had, you know, its craziness, you know, like I said, you know, prostitution, opium dens, you know, legal gambling, boozing, and I'm sure there's a little bit of smuggling going on as well, even probably, you know, a few Shanghais. It wasn't as big as Seattle as it was probably up in Vancouver or even Portland. But yeah, you know, like I said, it's got its fair share of tragedy.
So are the tunnels very haunted today?
Oh, yeah. In fact, you know, some of the things that I talk about, you know, on the tours, and people have always asked me, what do I think is the most haunted, especially when it comes to Seattle? I'm going to first go to the Seattle Underground. Now, and that could easily be the fact that I've had more opportunities. You know, like I said, I've been to some of the most haunted places, you know, throughout the world, and I've probably have very limited experiences in some of these places, but I have access to the Seattle Underground on a daily basis. So I have more opportunities to have these encounters and submit more evidence to prove that, yes, these areas are indeed haunted. In fact, you know, I've gotten some amazing EVPs in the Seattle Underground. One EVP that I like to talk about takes place in an old bank vault. When Seattle had raised itself, one of the problems that we had was during the gold rush, miners were being attacked for their gold. People were doing whatever they could to get a hold of the gold, come back to Seattle. And this means they're lying, cheating, stealing, even killing to get a hold of gold. So what they would do is they created these underground vaults, and these vaults were open later throughout the evening. And the vaults are in the underground section. So if you are a miner, you come into Seattle and you just miss the business hours, you still might be lucky enough to get into the underground and get that gold into a safe place. Well, again, underground is very dark. So they weren't very well lit. So it was very easy for somebody to hide in a darkened corner, wait for a miner to walk by, grab him, stab him, take his gold, and run. And that happened a lot in the underground. So I was actually in the vault area with my team, and we were doing some investigating. And a couple of strange things happened. Now, one of the most amazing EVPs that I captured was when we asked, "Can you tell us your name?" And we clearly get the response, "Edward." Now, I should have asked you. I could have sent you some files that you probably could have played. But that was a really cool EVP. But another time, my team was investigating that same area. Now, I wasn't with this team, all right? I was with another team. And the team was actually picking up on some weird noises that they couldn't explain. So they asked out loud. They said, "Is that you?" And they got a response. When they reviewed it, it said no. And it was very clear. Now, what made this EVP even more credible for me is when I finally met up with the team and they were, telling me the noises they were hearing and they thought it was a ghost, I was there when they heard the noise. Now, I used to be a tour guide for the Seattle Underground, so I was a little more familiar with a lot of the noises that happened in the underground. So when they identified the noise and I was there to witness it, I was like, "Oh no, that's not the ghost." It ended up being a loose plate on the sidewalk. And so when people stepped on the plate, it made a noise in the underground. And so that's the noise that they heard. But yet they thought it was the ghost and asked, "Was that you?" And they clearly got a response from the spirit itself that says no. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
That is awesome. Up here we have a lot of the same experiences that you have down there, because the town I live in is literally built right over the top of the old Gold Rush Trail that went right to the Klondike in the Yukon and Alaska. And this entire road for the next 1,500 miles is literally filled with bodies and buried gold that has never been found. And so listening to the stories about, people killing and pillaging for gold and whatever else it is very familiar, because technically Seattle is along that route, all a little bit off, but it's still along that route where gold ruled the day 150 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. And again, that all goes down to some of the tragic events that the city had to go through, to get where it is today. And a lot of that was the fact that when, the Seattle Gold Rush, happened, it was a big thing for the city. And like you said, people were doing whatever they could to get hold of this gold. And it led to a lot of unfortunate deaths. So I could imagine, being a miner and you actually are coming back to the city, with a little bit of gold in your pockets. You're excited. You got all these big plans. And then all of a sudden somebody strikes you in the head, takes your gold, and you're dead. So you're still holding on to that probably that feeling like I was going to do something with my life. I had this opportunity to do something amazing, and that was taken away from me,
It's the same thing as up here, where we have a building on our museum called the Post House that it's only half the building now, but it was a bar/brothel. Mm-hmm. So all these guys, all these prospectors would come in for a drink and a lay, drop some gold, and once they were drunk enough, the lady who ran the hotel and the brothel would literally take them outside and Shanghai them, keep it polite, and take all of their gold and dispose of their body out in the wilderness. Well, there's enough wild animals around here where bodies don't last long. So right. It's amazing how cutthroat the gold rush made people. It's sickening to think about it in today's society, but it was kill or be killed back then. Right.
It was. Seattle had its, fair share of scams too with trying to get a hold of this gold. The ladies would actually use a lot of these sticky creams in their hair. And so what they would do is when they see a miner with, gold, they would, say, "Oh, please, let me touch it. Let me touch it." And so, of course, that stuff would be in their hands and on their hair. And so they get a chance to hold some of these, pieces of gold and get really excited. And of course, they'd give the gold back, but what they would do is then they'd rub their hands into their hair. And throughout the day, after touching all these pieces of gold, they could go home and now bathe in, this nice little, bucket, and all that gold that they had touched, the gold dust would actually start to fall off of them and into this bucket. And then they would actually have quite a bit to get through the next week. So, yeah. In fact, there was a really cool law in Seattle that you couldn't have any flower beds, flower vases or anything like that hanging outside your window over 2 stories. Because it also became one of the things that a prostitute would lure you to a certain spot outside the building, and somebody up above would drop a flower pot on your head. And when you're out cold, they would, of course, pick your pockets, and then you'd be left with nothing.
It was an ugly time.
There's a whole bunch of them.
It was an ugly time indeed. Ross, I'm going to get you to hold on here for a few minutes because we are going to hop out for our first break of the night. Our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio, Ross Allison. You go to his website. It's called aghostinvestigations.com. aghostinvestigations.com. I also highly suggest, while you're on his website, check out the Angry Ghost Hunter blog. That is a great piece of writing right there. You're definitely going to want to check it out. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll see you on the other side. Coming September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon. Hi, this is Dave Scott. The event will be held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Come join us for an amazing weekend of speakers talking all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Sasquatch, intuitiveness. Listen to great speakers like Miriam Delicato, Samantha Mowat, and the crypto guru Ronald Murphy. Get your VIP passes by going to spacedoutradio.com and clicking on the Paracon banner. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit. And expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and thank you for joining the ride. Tomorrow night on the program, we stick with the paranormal. Ghosts of the Great White North. I will be joined by Mike Morin, and we will get some investigators in from Calgary, Alberta, to tell you about the ghosts that are haunting Alberta's second biggest city, or biggest city, whichever you want. It's a good town, nice clean town, good stampede there. Hockey team is questionable, to say the least, being a Oilers fan. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, we get going at spacedoutradio.com. Now, we want to remind you that we are on terrestrial radio on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Ellitriferous. Ellitriferous is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. I'm on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Read up on the Encounter Online, our news section. You can go to our store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, stickers, and if you're looking for a weekend getaway, how about the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, September 29th to October 1st, right here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. Until July 31st, VIP tickets will be 10% off, so make sure you pick them up. Have a nice weird weekend spent with us. Tonight we are talking all things ghostly down in the Emerald City. From Seattle, Ross Allison. Ross, welcome back.
Great to be back.
I want to start off with a couple of questions here. In the tunnels, did you ever pick up any animal spirits? Dogs barking, cats meowing, horses?
I can't say that we have. As I'm thinking back on everything, there's actually even stories that when they ran out of dirt, they had to find ways to level off the streets. And so what they ended up doing is they had to use a lot of the rubble from the fire. They used, old wagons, broken down boats, and even dead horses were put into the city streets just to level them off. So I wouldn't be surprised if you actually would hear a horse walking around in the underground sections, but no, I haven't.
I'm surprised by that, considering there were so many horse and buggies, dogs running around, because, let's face it, back then, there was no pet rules. You know what I'm saying? And right. I know from the ghost hunt tours that I do at the local museum here to help raise money for it, in the first tour we did this year, some ladies on my team, they actually set up right beside this little girl who's known to haunt the house. And we never even knew, after years of this place being known haunted, that there was a ghost cat inside.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knew.
Yeah. No, I can't recall any stories offhand, honestly, of any, cats or dogs. When you bring up a horse, I do know that there's a ghost horse at the Lakeview Cemetery up on Capitol Hill. There's a pretty interesting story about that. His name was Buck. And the story is that this guy, he loved his horse. And when his horse passed, he ended up having his horse buried in our cemetery. Even had this nice monument of a horse statue put over his grave. Well, the locals did not like the fact that there was a horse buried in their cemetery. So they fought and fought. And so it was actually determined that he was going to have to move the horse. So the story is, or the claim is, that he didn't move the horse, he only moved the monument so that he could still be buried with his horse. Now, today, people that actually visit Lakeview Cemetery have claimed to hear what sounds like the clomping of a horse on the cement pathways throughout the cemetery. Some have even claimed to hear the neighing of a horse. So that's the only horse ghost story that I can think of right now.
Let's get to a question from Teresa, and she is asking, is there still a ghost named Angeline or something like that down by the market? Her friends told her that she haunts the area there and is very well known.
Well, Princess Angeline is actually a well-known story in Seattle because she actually was the daughter of Chief Seattle. And she, again, one of the very few Native Americans who actually befriended the whites that had come to the area. And she is actually known, she was actually buried over at Lakeview Cemetery too, right next to Henry Esser, who she'd become very good friends with. And so Princess Angeline is known to haunt various locations because she was such an icon for the people of Seattle during her lifetime. She's known to be seen along the waterfront, walking around carrying some of her baskets that she would actually weave and sell to the tourists. She's also seen on the ferry going out to Bainbridge Island. She would be seen sitting at one of the seats on the ferry, only going out towards Bainbridge Island, and then, of course, she'd never be seen again. But she's also been seen quite a bit at the market as well. In fact, there was a bead shop that actually had quite a few encounters with her, where they claimed that they would get there in the morning, opening up the store, and here is this woman going through the beads and like, oh my God, how did you get into our store while it was closed? And of course, they go to address her, and she's gone. She vanishes right in front of their eyes. Yeah, Princess Angeline is actually a very well-known ghost for Seattle, and again, an icon for the city as well.
There's a lot of people, and I know people who have gone up to the grave of Jimi Hendrix, trying to figure out if they can, I don't know, get a little voodoo child while they're there. You know, have you ever investigated around his gravesite? Because it is a real big and popular memorial shrine.
It is. It is. I have never personally investigated it just because I've never heard any stories of him haunting a location. Now, when he's buried in Renton, now I have not seen the new monument that they made for him. I don't know how old it is, but it was years and years ago when I actually went out there when he still had a little marker. Now there is this huge monument for him, which is awesome. But yeah, I've never actually personally investigated it, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Has anybody gotten anything, do you know?
I know they got some EVPs, but they weren't sure if it was him or not. It might have been. It might have been other spirits in the area, but you have to wonder. I mean, with Seattle's music scene, and it was so great, but it's been so deadly at the same time. And, you know, never mind Jimmy. You think of Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, now Chris Cornell from Soundgarden and Audioslave, and there's been more. Those are just the more popular ones. You know, is there something sort of dark cloud hovering over Seattle when it comes to the music scene and taking people young?
You know, They say there's this thing to Seattle that Seattle has the highest suicide rate. And many people blame that on the fact that, you know, it's just because we're always, you know, have all these gloomy skies. People aren't getting enough, you know, vitamin D from the sun. I don't necessarily follow that logic. You know, I think just with any, you know, music scene, you know, it's got to be a hard life. There's got to be a lot of, you know, pressures. There's got to be a lot of substance abuse, you know, just to get through the day for a lot of these people. So I don't think it's just a Seattle thing. You know, it's obviously, you know, everywhere. It's just unfortunately, you know, Seattle has been involved in creating such icons in the scene that unfortunately, you know, we tend to focus on those individuals and forget the others that have probably, you know, died of the same reasons.
Well, it's the same climate as Vancouver. And Vancouver doesn't have the lowest suicide rate, but it doesn't have the highest either. But then again, with all of the technology and the mainstream companies that are down in Seattle, it would make sense because Seattle has really turned over the last 30 years into a very high-pressure city.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. It's, we've really have started to make our mark in society, especially with all the bigger companies. So yeah, I hear you there.
Let's get to another question. This one comes from BTO, and he is asking, Ross, what is your most overwhelming or compelling personal paranormal experiences and the best data you've ever collected?
Oh, there's so many amazing experiences that I've had throughout the years. Like I said, I travel all over the world, and I get to go to some amazing places. In fact, this year, I'm taking my team out to Europe again, and we're going to be focusing on spending the night in haunted castles. So I'm really excited about that. I've had the opportunity to investigate haunted castles, but I've never had the opportunity to spend the night. So it's always been on my bucket list. So now I'm heading out to, we head out to London, and we're going to take the train up and spend the night at Chillingham Castle. Then we are going to go up to Scotland, and we are going to be investigating Roslin Castle for 3 nights. We have it all to ourselves. And then we cross the water over into Northern Ireland, and we're spending 2 nights at Ballygolly Castle. And then we head down to Dublin. So I'm really excited about that. But, when it comes to experiences and evidence, it's so hard to choose, what's the best. Because a lot of it, ties into the experience behind it and the story behind it. I know a lot of people really love to hear my story about St. Louis University. That was a pretty interesting experience, when it comes to people asking me my most terrifying experience. And I wouldn't say it was terrifying, but it does scare a lot of people when I tell it. So I'll tell that one real quick. Now, I lecture at colleges and universities all over the U.S., and when I do my lecture, I'll also take the students on a ghost hunt of their campus. And I was invited to St. Louis University. Now, if people aren't aware of this, St. Louis University actually was involved in the Exorcist case, the one that inspired the movies with Linda Blair. Now, I actually was invited to the campus, did my lecture, take them on a ghost hunt, and I wasn't too much aware of their paranormal history. So when I get there, of course, they're telling me, what had happened here, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Now, they take me to this building that is now owned by the campus, but it was owned by the church that was involved. And so, of course, the students are taking me throughout the different, floors and everything. And it was no different than any other campus until I got to the 4th floor. Once I got to the 4th floor, I realized, oh my gosh, this place is abandoned, run down, holes everywhere, graffiti everywhere. And I'm just thinking, oh, wow, this is weird. And it's huge up there. And I'm thinking, why doesn't the campus utilize this space? They could be using it for storage or, even dorms, I would think. But the students tell me that there's been so many problems on the 4th floor that they've completely shut it down. And, when they're referring to problems, they're referring, to paranormal problems. And I'm thinking, okay. Now, the 4th floor, here's the history of the building. I should go back a little bit. The history of the building was when it was owned by the church, the nuns used to live on the 4th floor, and they used to teach Sunday school on the 4th floor. In fact, when I went into a few of the rooms, I could see the old chalkboards on the walls. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so they're taking me through, all the different rooms, and they take me into this one room, and they say, oh, this is where a nun had committed suicide. And I'm thinking, oh, that's great. Not that she committed suicide. It was just a good lead, for the investigation. So we continue on, through all these different rooms. And I finally walk into this one room. And right when I walked into this room, I heard this crunch underneath my feet. And I looked down and I realized I'd stepped on a dead bird. Now, I was kind of surprised by this because I had already been through most of the 4th floor and I had not come across any dead animals. And so, there's this one bird. But, again, I'm not too surprised because I've been in a lot of abandoned places and come across, dead animals that die in there because they don't know how to get out. So I just kind of kicked the bird over to the side so no one else would step on it, and I shine my light through the rest of the room. And what's shocking is the room is just filled with dozens and dozens of dead birds. They're all over the place in this tiny little room. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Now, what makes this even more interesting is the fact that security had gone around and removed all the doors on the 4th floor. Now, they did this to the fact that they've had problems with students constantly sneaking up there to scare each other. So it just made it easier for security to basically not have to open and close doors. So they had removed all the doors. And so now I'm realizing, wow, these birds had access to the whole 4th floor. Why did they all choose to die in this one room? Well, all the students are freaking out behind me. And one student tells me, this is the room. I'm like, this is the room? What do you mean? This is the room that the boy had stayed in. Now, story has it that the boy that was involved in the exorcism case was brought to the campus. He was brought in by the campus because the church right next door that owned the building was involved in the exorcism. So he was brought here. Now, they believe that they could not perform a full exorcism on the boy in the church because this could possibly kill him. So they had moved him to various secret locations and performed multiple exorcisms on the boy, believing that every time they performed an exorcism, some of the demons will escape. And this is the theory that it's more than one demon. So basically, I'm now standing in a room where the boy had stayed, and an exorcism had been performed in this room. Okay, creep factor's gone up a little bit here. So I decide, okay, this is interesting. Let's go ahead and, pull out some of the equipment and see what we get. Now, I give the students some of the basic equipment to use on the investigation. And we're in this room for less than 5 minutes when all of a sudden, all the equipment starts to go off at the exact same time. The temperature started to drop in the room rapidly to the point where I'm expected to see my breath anytime soon. The EMF detector's going off like crazy, and we can't find the source of any EMF readings. Where is all this coming from? And the compass is spinning around and around and around, and it will not stop. It's going around like crazy. So I got to document this. I got to prove that we are really experiencing this. Well, luckily for me, my camera shoots an infrared video. So I switch my camera over to video real quick. I start filming everything that's going on. I'm filming the equipment going off. I'm filming the students' reaction. And we're also, trying to capture whatever's there, to see if it'll communicate with us. So I start asking questions into the air. Because the activity starts to slow down. The EMF detector starts to slow down a little bit. And I'm thinking, okay, before it ends, let's try for some EVPs here. So I'm asking questions into the air. And I happen to ask the question, can you tell me whose room this is? Now, there's about, 12 seconds of silence when all of a sudden I start to hear crying. And I turn around and I realize that a couple of the female students have started to cry because they're so terrified being in this room. So I realize, okay, they're uncomfortable. I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable too because I don't have my normal team with me. This is just college students. And so for me, it's always about safety. So I decide, okay, you know what? I don't know what we're up against here, you guys. Let's go ahead and wrap it up and we'll move on to somewhere else. Now, my intent was that after the investigation with the students, I'd have the opportunity to go back and continue to do the investigation, but I didn't that night. So I finally got home and started reviewing all the evidence that I collected at all these different campuses. And I got to that video, and I got to the part where I'd asked, can you tell me whose room this is? Now, I'm going to edit this because I don't want to offend any of your listeners, but it basically said, F you, it's mine. So that was pretty creepy.
That would scare me. That would scare me. Have you been back there since?
Yes, I have. And the story gets even more interesting. Now, I had not been asked back for, I think it was about 4 or 5 years later that they asked me back. And so now they've actually remodeled the 4th floor. They actually have some more offices and a few classrooms, and there's this big open space up there. So, I'm thinking, and in fact, that, the person in charge of, having me come out, she's telling me all this stuff. And so we're talking because, she heard about my story and she wanted me back. And she's like, I wonder if we can find that room. And I was like, it's been so long. I have to go by memory where that room was. And so we talked, for like a few weeks before I actually got out there to see what they had done. And come to find out that one room that we had actually had that experience had not been touched. In fact, they've completely shut that off from the whole rebuild. Again, going back to, there's been so many problems with that one room. Security has actually stored bikes in there. And they'd come back and they'd find their bikes were mangled. The bars would be bent around. The tires would be flat. The seats would be turned around. Chains would be ripped off the bike itself. So they couldn't even use the room for storage. Well, knowing that they actually still preserved this one room, I decided, okay, here's my opportunity to, see what's going on here. So I was, lucky enough to, set up some equipment in the room, and I was able to set it up for overnight and see what I get. Now, the only way to access this room now is you have to go through a door, and then there's this old, creaky staircase that goes directly up to the room. Now, I set up my, equipment. I set up some recorders up there. And the next day, I was able to go back and collect the recorders. Now, nothing looked like it was disturbed. I had set some things up to see if it'd be moved around. It wasn't. But, I still had my recordings to review. So, of course, I get home, start reviewing my recordings, and I captured some amazing EVPs. Now, there are audio clips where you'll hear somebody walking up there, back and forth. Back and forth. You also hear what sounds like a train coming up to the building. And as the train's coming up the building, you can hear what sounds like a woman banging on a door screaming, "Let me out, let me out." But there's no train in the area. Now, what was interesting is when I submitted the evidence that I collected to the campus, and I told, this is what I got, she did some research, and she found that there was a train that did come into the area back in that day. But no longer. So, yeah, it got definitely really interesting, and I'm hoping that they'll have me back again sometime soon.
Shar wants to know a couple of questions. How long ago did you do that the first time?
Oh, gosh, the first time I've been doing this lecture tour for, how many years? I started in 2003 is when I started the lecture tours, and I think it was about 2005 or 6 was the first time that I was out there and had that experience.
Her daughter went to St. Louis University, so she's wondering what building you were investigating with that.
It's the one right next to the church. And you could see it's a very, kind of Gothic building as well. But it's right next to church. If you're facing the church, the front of the church, and it's a big white church, it would be to the left. I forget the name of the building. But yeah, it's right next to the church. I mean, you can look out the window and see the church.
Her final question in her hat trick of questions here is asking: do you think the priest's bond held that entity in that room?
I'm not sure. I've never been directly involved in exorcisms, but I'm, the situation is, of course, I wasn't involved in that case as well, and those that were involved are no longer around. So even our research information is pretty limited. But I would love to go back and continue to do investigations. Now, granted, people have always asked me, would I investigate alone in that place? And my answer is no. That is probably one of the few places I would not want to be alone in. Just knowing the history of that place, and knowing what possibly it could be. Obviously, it's a negative entity, so I would probably want a little more protection by having a few other investigators with me in that situation.
Do you protect yourself in a situation like that? Do you bless yourself? Do you use sage or some First Nations type of powers?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not a very religious person. And when it comes to the investigation for the team, if you're going to be a scientific-based group, you really can't bring religion into it. I want to be respectful towards everybody's beliefs. Now, I do encourage, my members, if they have a strong belief or a strong faith, definitely do what you want. If that means wearing a crucifix, around your neck when you do an investigation, do it. I definitely encourage you to follow what you need to do to protect yourself. But, for me, I think what's kept me safe, as I should say, knock on wood, is I've always been very respectful. I'm not going to go into a place where obviously there could be something very negative and be disrespectful, and I hate to say it, but to piss it off, because then, yes, you're probably going to be in a situation where it's going to come after you. So I would never put myself in that position. I think as long as I'm respectful towards all, beings out there, then I probably wouldn't be putting myself in that much danger,
And that's also a good example, too, of a place where very new paranormal investigators probably should not be investigating.
Right. I agree.
Getting back to what we were talking about in hour number 1. Teresa has a question for you. Ross, did you collect any dead birds or any bent or broken bicycles you speak of that you may have displayed in your museum today?
Oh, I wish. Actually, when I, go back to those situations, I didn't have my museum at that time. I probably, being as morbid as I am, I probably would have liked to have taken a dead bird home. But at that time, I didn't have my museum. Now, as I go to some of these places and I have the opportunity to collect some more haunted objects, I definitely would love to. But I didn't. It was a missed opportunity. Sorry.
Well, sorry for you, not us. Sorry for you. I'm very curious about your museum. Tell us about it and where people can find it.
Well, if you are in the Seattle area or visiting the Seattle area, you can find Spooked in Seattle Ghost Tours at First and Cherry. We're right in the heart of Pioneer Square in Seattle. And we actually obtained the basement of a historic building built right after the Great Seattle Fire. And this ended up being like over 7,000 square feet. Now, I was actually drawn to this location because at the time when I started my tours in Pioneer Square, it used to be a restaurant known as D'Annunzio's. And my team actually had the opportunity to investigate this restaurant. And they had talked about the ghosts of a little girl that haunted that place, even of a woman that had been known to, move dishes around and all kinds of interesting stories. So it was a really cool place to have the opportunity to investigate. Plus, they also had a small section of the underground. So that was another big draw for me. Now, one of my first interesting experiences was the fact that I was doing an investigation for a local news crew. And they were following me around throughout these different sections of the underground. And, of course, we get to the underground of this restaurant, and they wanted to interview me. And, as we were starting to wrap up our investigations for the night. Now, this is around 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, the guy, with the news crew says, "Oh, just be a quick, 10-minute interview." And I'm like, "Okay, let's wrap this up, and so we can all go home, go to bed." Well, what was supposed to be just a quick 10-minute interview ended up being over 45 minutes long. And the reason why it ran so long is because they kept having to stop and start over and over and over again. So they kept asking me the same question again and again and again. So I'm kind of getting a little annoyed, but I can obviously, see that they're struggling with something. So I asked them, I said, "Hey guys, is there something I can help you with? Because I really want to go home, go to bed." And the guy with the audio equipment, he pulls off his headphones and he says, "I'm so sorry, Ross." He says, "Every time you start to talk, we keep getting all these interruptions. We're not sure what's causing that." And so I started to think, I'm like going, gosh, why would they be getting these interruptions? And then I realized, these guys are using professional audio equipment. And if you're not familiar with it, that audio equipment has a 3-second delay. So the guy with the headphones can actually hear what's being recorded so that he can make sure that they have the best audio before they go back to the studio. So little does this guy know, what he's hearing are EVPs as they happen. So the next day he sends me a bunch of clips to analyze. And in one of these clips, you can clearly hear me being interviewed. But in the background, you can hear what sounds like children talking and giggling, and then they start to sing. So it was an experience like that, in that section of the underground, and then finding out that, the restaurant moved out. And, of course, this place sat abandoned for 2.5 years. And I was just like, gosh, no one's moving to this spot. And I was just, I was desperately trying to get a hold of the owner of the building to say, "Hey, can we please, bring our tours in?" When all of a sudden I was able to, get in touch with the owner. And the guy was, really cool. And he's like, "If you guys want to use the space, use the space." And we worked out a really awesome deal. And so now here I have this haunted location with a section of Seattle Underground that was over 7,000 square feet. I had to figure out, what am I going to do with all this space? Yes, I want to bring my tours in here, but I have all this space to fill. And so I just started, collecting this memorabilia, death memorabilia. So I started, bringing in vintage coffins, mourning dresses, mourning jewelry, human skeletons. And then, of course, throughout the years, people started, giving me all these haunted objects that they didn't want anymore. And so I had this, awesome haunted doll collection and other objects, and it just took off from there.
How popular has it become in the tourist attraction area of Seattle?
Oh my God, it's been extremely popular. This year we have been so busy, especially with media. We already had a show called Mysteries of the Unexplained come out and film. We just did an episode for the Food Network, which was pretty funny. They actually found out it was our 13th anniversary, so they actually had a cake designer come in and do a special cake for us, and so they filmed an episode of that. And then, of course, we've got all kinds of media contacting us that want to hear the stories of our location. It's really taken off for us.
What is your most haunted item in your building right now, in your possession?
Most haunted item. When you say most haunted, I'm thinking, probably the most active object that we've had, it has been Mr. Creepy. Mr. Creepy is a ventriloquist doll that I obtained when I was shopping one day. Now, as I start to collect, these things from my museum, I visit a lot of antique stores, and I go in and I ask them if they have any, any death memorabilia, and I also ask them if they have anything that's odd. And I let them interpret what they think is odd. So I went to this one antique store here in Tacoma, and of course, I asked her if she had anything odd. And immediately, she takes me to the back of the store, and she points to the bottom of the shelf of this glass cabinet, and she says, "You might be interested in Mr. Creepy." So here's Mr. Creepy's story. She had obtained Mr. Creepy in an estate sale. He was built in the 1960s by a retired ventriloquist artist. He apparently goes back to the vaudeville days here in the Northwest. And he made this ventriloquist doll in his likeness, but he also made a female counterpart in his wife's likeness. Now, what makes these dolls a little more unique is they actually use their real hair on these dolls. So this woman, she has to buy the dolls as a pair. They were only sold as a pair, so she buys them and she takes them to her antique store. And she puts them on a shelf, behind her. And she goes, for, quite some time, with no problem with these dolls. Well, she ends up having to move. So she packs up the dolls individually and she puts them in storage. Well, she finds her new location. She goes back to the storage unit, and she only finds Mr. Creepy. So she takes Mr. Creepy to her new store, and she unpacks him, and she puts him in the glass case behind the cash register. And shortly after, she's, revealed them and put them in this glass case, she starts getting these weird feelings like there's somebody standing behind her and watching her. She's always got this feeling like there's somebody breathing down the back of her neck. And it would make her feel uncomfortable. In fact, she even said that she would come into the store some days and find his head turned in a new direction, his eyes looking in a new direction. One day she even came in and found the glass case wide open. So this actually, freaked her out quite a bit. And this is why she actually named him Mr. Creepy. Now, she decided that she didn't want to deal with him on a daily basis, so she put him in the back of the store on that bottom shelf. And just so she could forget about him until I came into the store. So, of course, I'm thinking, okay, this is an interesting story. So I decided to take him. And so I took him, and I put him, brought him to Spooked in Seattle, and I put him in, this nice big glass case that we had. And it was a big, heavy glass case. And it was a glass case you had to pull away from the wall, unlock the glass doors to get him into the glass case. Then, of course, shut the doors, lock them, and push it back up against the wall. Well, I had just put him in the glass case, and a few days later, I was alone at Spooked in Seattle, when all of a sudden I heard this thud against glass. And, of course, I'm, thinking, something happened in the gift shop, so I better go check it out. So, of course, I walk out, I'm looking in the gift shop, and I can't find anything disturbed. And I'm walking around, trying to figure out what could have caused that noise. Now I'm kind of coming around the tables, and I'm now facing that glass case, and immediately I noticed his head is now turned and leaning against the glass. So I immediately, being the ghost hunter that I am, I immediately, pull out my camera phone. I take a picture, just to show that this really did happen. Well, a little later in the day, as I'm showing people, the photo, somebody, points out, it's like, oh my God, do you see the reflection? And so I quickly look at the picture and I zoom in, and the reflection is a lot different than the doll itself. Where this doll has big round eyes, in the reflection they're very droopy, higher forehead, and more lifelike than the doll itself. And so I believe I captured the spirit of the man that haunts this doll. And I think he's just looking around for the female counterpart that he had been with since the day he was created. And now they've been separated, and he wants to know where she is. So I am still in search of what we now call Mrs. Creepy.
Do you think that she just kind of disappeared on her own if she was haunted as well?
I don't know. Without finding her, I don't know. And again, the woman that owned these dolls, she never had any issues when they were together. It's not until they got separated. And she has not been able to find her. But she has, a huge storage unit. She actually has multiple storage units. And, she says they're just a little overcrowded with all the stuff that she's collected and her family's collected that, she believes that she's still there. She just hasn't come across her yet. Because I'm still, every once in a while, will ask her, did you find her? Did you find her? Because I would love to bring those two together. Because I think that might be a happy ending to his story.
No kidding. That is eerie. Dolls, to say the least, are just creepy, no pun intended, at the best of times. What other kind of items do you have in your store?
Oh, we got all kinds of fun stuff. We have an alarm clock that actually sat on the desk of a warrant officer in a prison. And after the prison was closed down, the clock had been moved around to different people. And they say that this clock, which has never been wound, has never been used in decades, still every once in a while will start to tick. And sometimes they even say the alarm will actually go off. Now, I've never heard the alarm or the ticking, but that was an interesting piece that was donated to us. We also have a little doll that's about the size of your hand, and it's actually of a stillborn. And the stillborn was covered in what they claim to be virgin blood wax. And this little doll is actually used in a ritual that if a woman is wishing to have children, she will sleep with this doll either under her pillow or under the bed. And they say that this will make her fertile and she will bear children. So we got all kinds of fun stuff. Tons and tons of home dolls. Oh, yeah.
Do you find that the majority of your items that you have are donated to you because people just don't know what to do with them? Or are you out there searching and, almost picking for them?
It's a little bit of both. We get a lot of pieces that people don't want. They claim to have bad feelings, or they just feel that there's something attached to it. So I'm more than happy to take it off their hands. But then, of course, I'm also seeking pieces as well. As I'm, traveling all over the world, I'm looking for more and interesting pieces to add to the museum.
Do you find, though, that people are quick to get you things? Because I'm sure besides what you have displayed, you probably have a lot of things in the back room just wondering where you're going to put them.
To be honestly, when it comes to donations, it doesn't happen as much. It would be nice to have more than we could display, but I probably have a few pieces that I have not had the opportunity to display just because I don't have room in the glass case, so I have to get another glass case. But it's probably just about 2 or 3 pieces, so it hasn't been that bad to where I'm so over, populated with haunted objects.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's neat, because, you go into some of these antique stores, and I know Robert Murch, I'm sure you know Robert, the fine collector of Ouija boards, has the largest Ouija board collection in the world. He has people all over the world searching for Ouija boards with him. And he's often trying to find the oldest boards that he can find. Do you have people spread around looking for spooky objects for you?
To be honest, no. I think, every once in a while somebody, might have heard of my museum, might reach out to me every so often. But no, I don't have people actively looking for me.
Mm-hmm. I just think that would be interesting. I got to come down and see it. I really do. What do you think of, though? Let me ask you a different point to this as a haunted collector. What do you think of people going on Craigslist now, or Kijiji, or sites along those lines, and selling haunted objects?
Oh, well, that's a big problem nowadays. One of the things, as in the past, when I started my museum and I was searching for interesting pieces for the museum, one of the things that I learned very quickly that, especially when it came to like eBay, you could easily search their history of what they've sold. And I find that if they've sold multiple haunted dolls, then it's probably not legit, I'm very picky when it comes to pieces that people want to claim that are haunted. And it has become a huge thing. And it kind of goes back to, me and David's book when we wrote, Haunted Toys. One of the things that I put in the book was, one of the first haunted dolls sold on eBay. And this doll, brought in, over $700, for the bid, because people wanted something like that. And you still find that today, because people have realized that some of these objects can go for a lot of good money, whether they're legit or not. How do you verify it? Even when they claim, it comes with a certificate of authenticity of being haunted. How do you prove that? It's one of those things that, unfortunately, there's too many con artists involved in the field as well. Whether it's for attention or nowadays for the money. It's really hard to validate those experiences. So it's always going to be buyer beware. Mm-hmm. So for me, I tend to do a lot of research, and hopefully, it's legit. But I'll be honest, over the half the dolls that have been given to me, I can't prove that they're all haunted. Some of them come with a great story, and I just okay, I'll be more than happy to give them a home. I'm expecting one day, to walk into my museum in the middle of the night and have all the dolls, scratching at the glass, trying to get out. But I believe, there are definitely a good portion of them that have some sort of entity tied to it, because we have had personal experiences. And it's until you have that personal experience that you can validate that doll definitely could be very well haunted. Just recently when I was filming for Mysteries of the Unexplained, they had me telling some of the haunted doll stories. And before, they were filming, I was actually wiping off the glass to the cabinets, and all of a sudden there was these smudges I could not get rid of, and I was like, why is this not coming off? And then I realized it was on the inside. And then right when the light hit it, I realized that those smudges were actually the handprint of a child on the inside of the glass case. I can't explain that.
Do you get a lot of unexplained activity? Do you continually have cameras filming your objects to see what happens?
We used to have a DVR system on the dolls. Unfortunately, the DVR system, you got to realize that, as they start to run continuously, the quality gets worse and worse and worse. So we haven't had a chance to upgrade it to a newer one so that, we can maintain that high quality for when you do have that experience. But a lot of it tends to be missed opportunities. Something tends to happen. Just recently, Mr. Creepy's eyes moved. It's one of those things, he was looking one way, and so you go to take a picture and you have to compare pictures and oh, yep, his eyes were looking that way. Now they're looking this way. So, as much as I try to document everything that happens at Spooked in Seattle, we tend to have more missed opportunities, unfortunately. And it's just like that in the field of ghost hunting. It's always those missed opportunities. They're very sneaky.
We only have about 3.5 minutes here before we got to go to break. Do you have any strange stories from occurrences besides Mr. Creepy that have happened inside the store that you can't explain?
Oh, yeah. One of the dolls we have is a doll with a broken face. And she was given to me by a woman that was taking a doll making class. And she obtained this doll from her mother, who actually owned this doll. It was her great-grandmother's doll. And this doll was missing its head. And her mother was like, could you please restore this doll? I would love to put it on display. And so, of course, her daughter takes it home and starts cleaning up and working on it. Now, one of the things that it had inside was an old air box, so that when you tilt it, it goes mama. And when you tilt it back, it goes mama. Well, she was never able to get that to work. But late into the night, she would be awoken in the middle of the night by hearing this doll calling out, mama, mama. She also would hear pitter-patter of feet going up and down the halls and doors opening and closing. It wasn't until the day she finished the head and attached it to the doll that things got worse. That night, she was awoken by the doll yelling, mama, mama, the stomping up and down the halls, the doors slamming closed. It freaked out her husband so much that he took a screwdriver and drove it through the doll's head, which shattered it and made her get rid of the doll. that's how I was able to obtain that doll.
John is asking at hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter, have you ever had two haunted objects that don't get along with each other?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Just to be honest, yeah, I can't think of anything like that.
That would be creepy. I do have to say, that would be freaky if all of a sudden you had a brawl happening in the store regarding, anything like that. Do you look for specific items? You mentioned dolls, but do you look for specific items, whether it's chairs, furniture, or just...
Well, I'm looking for pretty much anything that, has any claims to being haunted. It's not just dolls. I'd love to be able to have other objects rather than just dolls. So, yeah, I'm not limiting myself to just dolls. Anything that's got a good story and a ghost attached, I'd be open to it.
Is there anything that you are, besides Mrs. Creepy, or is there anything that you are looking for to add to the collection? Is there something that specific that you want to get your hands on?
Not really. I'm always, for my death museum, I'm always looking for vintage coffins and interesting, mementos of remembrance pieces of people that passed away. So I'm always looking for, interesting things like that. But when it comes to haunted objects, there's nothing that I'm particularly looking for. So yeah, no.
That's quite the hobby, Ross. I'm not gonna lie.
It is.
That's quite the hobby. If somebody wanted to, and we only got about 15 seconds, if somebody wanted to start a collection, where would you suggest they start?
Well,
save that answer for the next hour. We ran out of time here. I thought we had time. Apparently I lied, Ross. I apologize. Apparently I lied. Ross Allison is our guest tonight. You got to check him out in Seattle, his haunted store. Go to his website. It has everything on there. It's called aghostinvestigations.com. That website, once again, aghostinvestigations.com. And if you're in the Emerald City, make sure you take Ross's tour, because it's something that I think you would find pretty profound, especially if you're into the paranormal. We're going to get to more of your questions. I know they're building up. I will get to them, I promise, right after this. Hour number 3 with Ross Allison and Haunted Seattle coming right up on Spaced Out Radio. We'll talk to you right after the break. Looking for a great weekend getaway this fall? Hi there, this is Dave Scott. Come on up to the heart of British Columbia for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Speakers from all over North America are coming to discuss Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and intuitiveness for the 3-day event, September 29th to October 1st. For more information, go to spacedoutradio.com and click on the Caribou Paracon banner and book your tickets today. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Wachowski's Strange Days.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories. From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have a packed house in all the chat rooms and on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow night on the program, we stick into the paranormal realm. Ghosts of the Great White North, our monthly feature with Canadian Paranormal Investigations' Mike Morin. He is going to join us as a co-host, and we're going to be talking ghosts of Calgary, Alberta. It's going to be a great show indeed, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We're also live in New Orleans on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM, and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM. Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Ellitriferous. Ellitriferous is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Hey, we're all over social media. We'd love it if you join us. Follow us on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including our music man, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL. You can click on his page and listen to some great tunes. You can also join the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Hit up our store for a t-shirt, poster, or stickers. Maybe you're looking for a weekend getaway. September 29th to October 1st, we have the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon here in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia at the beautiful Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. Tickets are 10% off until July 31st. Those are all VIP tickets, so make sure you get those today as well. And you can read up on the Encounter Online, our great news section put together by Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. For the final time tonight, we introduce Ross Allison, his website. I highly suggest you check it out. aghostinvestigations.com. aghostinvestigations.com is the site, and if you're in Seattle, you got to take his haunted tour. I know when I get down to the Emerald City next, I'm going to be doing it. You should too. Ross, welcome back.
As always, it's great to be back.
You know, we have enough material to go a long, long time. We're going to have to bring you back. Definitely going to have to bring you back. But right before the break, we got cut off. I was asking you about being a haunted collector. If somebody wanted to start their own haunted collection, would you recommend it, number one? And number two, how do you get started?
Well, for me, how I got started, eBay was a great place, for a lot of the death memorabilia that I had collected. So that was a big start for me. And I know I shouldn't say that because now I'm going to be competing with everybody on eBay. But also antique stores was a great place. As I said, when I go into an antique store, without giving any leading information as to what I'm looking for, because one of the things that, people will try and sell you something that's not true either, is when you give them that leading information. I always, just go in and I ask, do you have anything odd? And let them, interpret what that could be, rather than going, do you have any haunted dolls? And then, of course, they'll make up a story about a haunted doll. So I kind of leave it at that, to them interpret that information. So that's always been my big helper when trying to find some of these, odd antiques and haunted objects. Also, it also helps to, be in touch with other collectors as well. Sometimes, I've started to learn that there's other people that collect haunted objects, and sometimes their collection gets overwhelming, and so they're often, handing off other pieces or want to do a trade or something like that. So it does help knowing other collectors as well.
Let's get to some questions. They're very much piling up. John at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter is asking, in Seattle, is there a high incident of Native American hauntings?
You know, I really wish there were more. I really do. Because one of the things that I really wanted to do to, be in touch with the Native American culture that was based in the Seattle area, I would love to be able to tell their stories. There has, as I was talking about, with Princess Angeline, the daughter of Chief Seattle, there's that story. There is a story of a Native American seen, walking on the shores around the waterfront of Seattle. But I would love to have more. Because like I said, I would love to put together a tour that really honors the Native Americans that were in the Seattle area.
Let's get to another question on Twitter. This one comes from Robin. Robin, I've never seen you around on Twitter before. Thank you so much for checking us out, and I do want to get to your question right now. He says, has anything paranormal ever happened in your death museum?
In the Death Museum, yes. We have quite a few things happen, around the haunted dolls. Like I said, there's Mr. Creepy. But one of our more famous stories is the little girl that I was talking about that was well known in the restaurant before we had actually done the museum. But one of the things that I didn't tell you about was when I first got the keys to that place, and again, this is after it had been abandoned for 2.5 years. I was really excited, our first place of our own, before we've had to share, with other businesses, and now we have our own place. This is pretty exciting, the adrenaline's going like crazy. So he hands me the keys. I immediately go downstairs, and I'm down there by myself, and this is like really cool. But I've also noticed it's a mess down there. When the restaurant moved out, they just left all kinds of stuff and trash behind. So it was also going to be a big project. So immediately, I'm kind of going through all the stuff that was left behind, and I found this little wooden chair. And I was like, oh, this is a really cool chair. It's a kid's chair, I should also point out too. So I decided to start a couple different piles. There was going to be a keep pile and then a pile that I wanted to make sure it goes to the dump. So I take this little wooden chair, and this was going to go into the keep pile. And I set it next to a door. And, of course, I leave that room, and I'm off, exploring, the rest of the building and what other treasures I could find. And I come back with another handful of stuff. And I go to set it by the chair, and I realize the chair's not where I thought I left it. So I look around, and it looks like it's moved, a few feet. But I didn't really put much into it because, again, I'm running off adrenaline. This is really exciting, to have my own place. So I didn't put much into it, so I just kind of set what I had in my hands down, and I go back and, start exploring some more. And I come back again with another handful of stuff. And now the chair is not where I last saw it again. But luckily for me, I found some chalk when I was going through, all this stuff. So I immediately go find that chalk, and I come back and I start drawing circles around the legs of the chair. So I know for certain, if it moves out of these circles, there's something going on. So again, I step out, come back with another handful of stuff, and sure enough, that chair has now moved another, 3-4 feet away from the circles. So I definitely knew that what was there was pretty active. Now, I immediately, believed it was the little girl. I figured, this has got to be that little girl letting us know that she's still around. So to make her happy, I went and purchased a doll for her. So I found this little doll that actually has a music box inside of her. And I put the doll on the chair, and I, said out loud to the little girl, I said, this is yours. I want you to be able to, feel welcomed here and play with this doll anytime you want. Well, shortly after I had done that, sure enough, when I was closing one night, I actually was leaving, and as I was going up the staircase, there's this window that looks into the Death Museum where the chair is. And right as I passed by the window, I heard the music box playing. Now, what I've always told people on my tour, I always forewarn them that I am one of those ghost hunters that when I hear something strange, I run towards it, not away. So I immediately, of course, ran into the room, ran to the chair, and nothing. Now that happened, a couple times where it's always, right when I get to it, it stops. Well, it wasn't too long ago. We had a paranormal group investigating in that area when they captured something pretty amazing. And they captured it on video. And we actually share this on our tour, that's how amazing this is. In the beginning of this video, you're going to hear, a guy, talking, and then all of a sudden he hears the music from the doll. And the doll is roped off so no one can get to the doll, just to make sure people aren't tampering with the doll. So it's roped off. And in the video, you can clearly see there's no one by the doll. And so he's all excited. He's like calling all the team over. He's like, oh, my God, the doll. And everybody, the whole team's gathering around. They're like, oh, my God, this doll, this is so cool. This is so cool. Well, they're getting too excited. And so one of the investigators, he's trying to get everybody else on the team to be quiet so that they can capture, the recording of this doll. So he says, hush out loud to his team. But right when he says that, the doll stops too. And that's all captured on video. Pretty amazing. So, yeah, there's things that happen around the death stuff as well.
Wow. That is interesting. Let's get to more questions. This one comes from Kat. She is asking, why do people get scratched? Are most cases accidentally afflicted? And why not something stronger than a scratch?
When it comes to scratching on investigations, I think in some cases, yes, it can be inflicted by whatever's there. Possibly some people take it as a warning, and that very well could be true. Scratches, in all the cases that I've been involved in, have been pretty rare. So it's not an everyday investigation type of thing that happens. But I have, and I'll be honest, I have found quite a few cases out there where people have inflicted it on themselves for attention. So you have to be aware of that as well. So I do believe it does happen. I'm not sure why. Again, being that they're extreme rare cases for us, we don't always have the opportunity to investigate that phenomenon more. But I believe in some cases, if you do get scratched, I do take it as possibly as a warning. Maybe you've gotten too close, or maybe you're ticking somebody off. There's it's a simple situation too where people have been slapped as well, and I take that as a warning. And again, it all goes to, and maybe we don't have those experiences because we don't disrespect the property or the entity that seems to be haunting the property. So maybe that's why my team doesn't have those things happen, because I teach my team to be very respectful, regardless of what you seem to be encountering. So I think in situations where people have those experiences is probably because they've gone in and they've ticked off whatever's there. So yeah, it does happen. I just think it's a lot more rare.
Follow-up question from Kat. She's saying, I don't understand why ghost spirits, what have you, end up just scratching people. Why not something more violent or more effective? Are most scratches self-inflicted on accident?
Well, I think in a situation, you have to think, why aren't people being picked up and tossed across the room all the time? It probably because it takes a lot of energy to produce that type of phenomena. A scratch probably doesn't take as much. There's even, situations where people have been pushed downstairs. So, do ghosts have the capability of causing more physical harm? Possibly, yes. There's cases, like right now, me and David are researching, where people are being, sexually attacked. So yes, they can go to extremes of, physically attacking people. Has a ghost ever murdered somebody? Well, if they murdered anybody, how would we know? We weren't there to witness the situation. So I think it all goes down to, the amount of energy it probably takes for them to cause the physical harm. And maybe they don't have that much energy. Maybe they want to forewarn you that much I could do. If you push my buttons, I may take it a little further. So again, it's a situation where it's not always available for us to investigate to find out the extremes that these encounters can go.
Let's get to BTO's question here. He's asking, Ross, have you had any other esoteric experiences besides ghosts, perhaps in cryptids or extraterrestrials?
I haven't. I keep an open mind to all those different things. When people, use the term, paranormal investigator, I try not to use it as much because, again, that opens so many more doors when you use the word paranormal. My passion has always been ghosts, and so I've always stayed focused on, ghosts. I've dabbled a little bit in, psychic research. Even being in the Northwest, I've never gone out looking for Bigfoot, but I keep an open mind, hey, who's to say he's not out there? I believe, we're definitely not the only beings out there. I definitely believe that there's probably other life on other planets, but I tend to be a little more skeptical. I don't think that they're living in the center of the earth and inbreeding with the women to make another race. I think that's a little too much for me personally. But there's other people that are out there and researching it, and that's awesome. It's great that there are people that can do that. But my main focus has always been ghosts. So I can't say I've actually, wait, I take that back. There was an experience I did have when I was 9 years old, but I don't know if it was, paranormal or, extraterrestrial. I was walking home with my aunt from the farm. This is when I was living in Wisconsin, and I was helping my aunt and uncle. They had a dairy farm, and they, we had a good, few blocks to walk to get back to the house from the barn. And it was late at night, and I happened to look up, and I saw what could best be described as, like a searchlight, where you just see the light portion of it, not the where the light's coming from, but as if the light just hit the sky. I saw real quick what looked like this disc of light hover above us and then dart off real quick. So probably might have been, but then I kind of ruled it out as maybe there was somebody in the farm nearby that had a high-powered flashlight and just shined it up in the sky, I kind of shrugged it off as a kid because she didn't see it. It happened so quick. I was the only one that happened to look up and saw it, and then that was it. So, was it possible UFO? I don't know. But I think that's probably the only other experience I had outside of ghosts.
I'm leaning towards you did, because last time I checked to see if there was a large flashlight, it ended up being a UFO on the ground 150 yards away from me. Yeah. Old Davey's a believer, man. Old Davey is a believer.
And that's awesome. Like I said, who am I to say? I've never investigated UFOs. I've never reached out and looked for Bigfoot. I pay you the utmost respect, and that's great. I leave that to other people that have the passion for that. My big thing is ghosts.
I didn't say I wanted it. Just ended up going that way. They didn't really give me a choice, They didn't give me a choice, and I'm still like, damn you, aliens. Damn you. Trip has a question about your haunted museum. He is asking, do you store your items away so that way people can't touch them, or are they out in the open for people to check out?
They are actually behind, and they're all stored in glass cabinets, so they're behind glass. So people aren't actually physically touching the objects.
Are you afraid that if they did touch the objects that they could be cursed or possessed?
You know, it's not that. I'm afraid of people being disrespectful. People not respecting other people's property. Come on. You know, we had some really cool stuff stored on display in the bathroom. Nothing of, value, but people steal it, It's just, unfortunately, people don't care about things like that. And they'll mishandle things, break things. And I do it to protect the objects, not necessarily the public.
And that makes sense. Eric, who lives in Concrete, Washington, we call him Coop around here, he's putting on a Paracon the week before mine. Forest Moon Paranormal, in my opinion, one of the best teams out there. If you've never worked with them, you need to check them out. But
I haven't yet.
Yeah, you have to. They're what they call an emergency squad. So he sends in his remote viewing team for when you get all these amateur paranormal teams who go in there and cause a ruckus and don't know how to clean it up. He sends his team in there by remote viewing to clear homes and businesses and places of spirits. It's actually pretty incredible to watch. I've had him do my house and everything, and I can't speak highly enough of the job that they do. But he's got a couple of questions for you. He is asking, what do you know about, if anything, about Thornwood Castle in Tillicum?
Thornwood Castle in Tillicum? Yes. Actually, interesting place. Thornwood Castle got its popularity when it was used for the movie Red Rose. Or Rose Red. Rose Red? Was it Rose Red? Yeah, Rose Red. It was a Stephen King movie about a house that was haunted by spirits and would change. And it was actually, he was inspired by the famous Winchester mansion in San Jose, California. So he created this story based off of kind of like that whole theme. And they filmed here in Washington, in the Seattle area, and they used the exterior shots, Thornwood Castle. And so it actually got to be very popular after that show aired on TV. And the owner herself claimed that the place was actually haunted. So yeah, it's an interesting place. Definitely has its ghost stories. But unfortunately, it's extremely hard to get into for investigations. Now, we had the one opportunity to investigate it. We didn't get anything personally on that investigation, but I do know stories do circulate around that place. It's believed to be haunted by a man, previous owner. But it's also, it's a bed and breakfast. And so the only way you can visit this is not open to the public. The only way you can actually visit this place is unless you book a room, because it's in a gated community. So you have to have access to get through the gate. So, but it's a great little place. In fact, it was featured in our book, Tacoma's Haunted History, if you wanted to learn more about that place.
And he's also asking about the ghosts that are said to be wandering around Pike Place Market.
Well, Pike Place Market, actually, another, great place. Pike Place Market has the story that I talked about. Princess Angeline is seen around the market. Another Native American is seen around the markets. In fact, we actually got to investigate the bead zone where Princess Angeline had been seen, and also a little boy that had been seen on that property. And that's actually inside the market itself. And It was actually a pretty interesting investigation. In fact, when they were doing some remodeling, they uncovered a section of wall that popped out and revealed a tiny little room. And in this room, they found children's toys that they believe actually belonged to the ghost of the little boy. Throughout the decades of his ghost being known to haunt that little shop, toys would disappear, and they all found them behind this wall in this little boarded off room. So that was pretty cool. But there's also a little park just outside the market where a woman has actually been seen quite often. In fact, she tends to be a beggar. People will see her sitting on the bench. And there was actually this, she'll be seen on the bench or she'll be seen wandering through the park. In fact, there was a couple that were sitting on the bench being romantic, looking out onto the water from the market. And this woman, comes up to them and, she's got her hand out for change. And so the guy, wants to get rid of her very quickly so that they can continue to make out. He reached in his pocket and he pulls out whatever change he had and he hands it to the woman, only to his surprise to find that all his change went right through her hands and landed on the ground in front of them. They both darted out of there.
That is a time to go. That is a time to go.
Oh, yeah.
Andrew has a question, and he is asking, what's the scariest ghost story you've ever heard about in Seattle?
Scariest ghost story in Seattle? Gosh. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one.
I'm going with the Mariners' record.
Oh, gosh. There's... I can't really think of anything that would be so terrifying. For me, I pretty much would do any type of investigation, but I can't really think of anything terrifying offhand, to be honest. Maybe something will come to me a little bit later, but yeah, I really can't think of anything terrifying right now.
Well, let's put that one in storage and go to Twitter.
Definitely.
Robin has a question, and he is asking, do you know about the haunted history of Oxford Saloon in Snohomish?
Yes. Gosh, it's been so long since we've been out there. My team actually investigated that place probably a good 10 years ago. Now, Oxford Saloon actually used to be a brothel. In fact, it is claimed that a lot of the ghosts that are there are some of the women that actually work there. And many men have had some pretty interesting experiences of being touched. Not of any sexual encounters that I'm aware of, but lots of touching. I believe there was even one story of a young man that actually would hear a woman whisper into his ear. He couldn't make out what she was being said, but he definitely felt that pressure and that the vocabulary of something being whispered into his ear. So, yeah, Oxford Saloon. I may have to try and get back there. It's been so long since we've been out that location. It's the thing, being one of the oldest groups in the Northwest, we had the opportunity to investigate, being the first to investigate a lot of these, notorious haunted places. But then we've also gotten to be so busy that we haven't had the chance to go back to some of these places, So, yeah, I'm going to have to put that one on my list and take my team out there.
You need to go look for Bigfoot, too, even though it's not your thing. Just to say that. Geez,
I'd be more open to doing Bigfoot now that we have thermal cameras.
Yes.
So at least I could tell right away, is that Bigfoot or is that a big black bear coming right at me?
Well, we have both, except let's throw in grizzly bears, too. We were actually we were actually out looking on Sunday in an area, but a good friend of mine around here, Mike, who helps me out, he's lucky. He's got a couple of sources. One works in forestry, and the other one is actually a conservation officer that will tip him off to any reports. And he's got 4 or 5 really good leads that we got to follow up recently here, and I'm looking forward to it. Let's get to Teresa's question here. She is asking, what is it that draws something to attach to an object, in your opinion?
Well, I think in a lot of cases, and again, me and David talked about this in our book, Haunted Toys, is, a lot of times, objects can hold on to the presence of the spirit because it was such a personal item to that person in life. That's why toys tend to be haunted by children, especially dolls, because they put so much love and care into these objects. And in passing, they still hold on to those feelings. And so there's always that attachment. The same thing, with, not just toys. There's lots of stories of, haunted, wedding rings or haunted engagement rings, haunted wedding dresses. I think it's just how attached was that person to it in life can determine on whether, if they can be attached to it in death.
Well, if you love something, I guess it's proving that you don't have to let it go, right?
Right. Well, it also can go into houses as well, Think about it at a time when somebody saved all their money to buy their first property, their first home, and then, you pass away, you probably aren't able to let go of that home.
Rahonda on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio is asking, did you ever get rid of something that truly scared you?
Did I ever get rid of anything that truly scared me? As for my collection, no. I have not given anything away in my collection. I think if I had those feelings about an object, I would be more into investigating that object to find out why I have those feelings. Is it something that's psychological, or is there something to this object that really causes fright? So my curiosity would take the best of me, and I would want to know why.
Let's get to Bill in the Space Travelers Club on Facebook. He is asking, Ross, what do you know about the Doris Bither haunting that was used as the basis for the movie The Entity?
Oh, I am actually, we're right in the middle since, me and David are working on one of our next books, which is going to be on haunted sex. We are actually diving into that case, and we are trying to actually interview those who were involved. So, all I know is, basically this woman basically claims that she was physically attacked by a ghost. Now, I know the movie does not follow the actual case 100%, but then which movie does? If we're talking about the Entity case or the Entity movie with Barbara Hershey, from what I found out in my research, the people that were involved in that case, especially when it comes to the sexual encounters, this is the woman that claims that she was sexually attacked by a ghost. I found that those claims of being sexually attacked happened way before the individuals that were involved in investigating the case. So that was never witnessed. All I do know is when they did investigate that case, the most famous photo is the light anomalies that they captured on film, where they shoot across the room, that they all witnessed these light anomalies shooting across the room, and they captured that on film, which is amazing. You had Dr. Barry Taff was involved in that case. So it's still an amazing case. I would like to, me personally, myself, want to know more about it. So I do know that me and David Weatherly are trying to interview more people that were involved in that to get some more details, because as you know, with our next book, we want to be able to touch on, the psychological aspect of, these claims of, men and women being sexually attacked by ghosts, and the true physical phenomena that's involved in that. So yeah, I've never personally got a chance to meet the woman. I do know she moved away. I think she moved to Texas. But I just know what's been out there circulating through the blogs and the personal interviews that have been done with some of the individuals. But I would love to learn some more about it. Definitely. It's very intriguing.
If you haven't talked to Hollywood psychic Patty Negri, she did an article about 2 years ago on ghost sex, and she actually has quite a few people whom she's interviewed about that, just for research, just so you know.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for the lead.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can give you her contact information afterwards.
Yeah, definitely.
BTO has a question for you here, and I think this is a kind of a fun one. Is there anywhere that you haven't investigated yet that you can't wait to get into?
Oh my gosh. There's quite a few places around the world. I think, right now, my biggest goal was to investigate, to spend the night in a haunted castle. So I'm achieving that I'm getting that off the bucket list. So I'm really excited about that this year with all the haunted castles. Chillingham Castle was a really one of the things on my list that I really wanted to do. So I'm doing that this year. I think, I've been very fortunate to visit, a lot of the most notorious haunted places out there, from Amityville House to, spending the night on Alcatraz, I can't think of anything that I haven't had the opportunity to investigate yet that is well known out there. I think I've been pretty lucky. Gosh.
Have you ever done Boeing Field? Would they allow you?
Field, no. I have actually tried. In fact, I wanted to do the Museum of Flight, because there's actually a story of one of the pilots who haunts one of the planes that is on display there. So I was denied that. But then again, I tried that, quite a few years ago. I'd probably say about 8 years ago, maybe. So sometimes you might be lucky enough as, employees change. You might find somebody who's more open to it. But Boeing Field, would be a great one to investigate because, when I wrote my book, Spooked in Seattle, I talked about a lot of the crashes that happened, around that area. A lot of the planes that went down and, knocked out houses and apartment buildings, all from Boeing Field. So I think that would be a fascinating place to check out.
I would be surprised if you got in there. If you get in there, I will drive down for that. I will, because every time I go to Seattle, I have to go to the Museum of Flight. It is just an incredible building. Last time I was there, showing how infrequent I get to Seattle. I believe in 2010, they actually had the original Air Force One there and the Concorde at the same time. So walking through them was kind of cool. But I'm a huge flight buff, so anytime I get to stare at airplanes and be at that level, it's just something about it. But, with the rich history of flight in Seattle, if you could get in there, man, I would love to go with you. I really would.
No, and I think it would be awesome. In fact, I got my book in my hands right now, and I'm trying to figure out what the plane was, because I do know there is a plane in the museum that people have seen a pilot sitting in the plane, and you can't get access into the plane. And he's always seen in his brown leather jacket. But I'm trying to figure out which plane it was, but I can't find the story right now. But next time you go back, there you go.
I will look.
It is in my book.
Definitely. I'm gonna next time I come down. I'm definitely gonna do the tour, because usually I try and get down for a New York Yankees series. I'm not one of these Canadians that flocks down for the Blue Jays. I come down for the Yankees. So if I get that opportunity, I'll hook up with you down there.
Anytime, and I'd love to throw you on a tour as well.
Absolutely. I'm curious. Seattle also has a very dark side with serial killers. The two that come to mind are Gary Ridgway and the Green River murders, which lasted over 20 years, and of course Ted Bundy. That's where he got his start.
Right.
Do you or have you ever had any cases of investigation involving any of the serial killers that have roamed the streets of Seattle in the area?
You know, we had actually gone to a portion of the river where some of the bodies had been dumped when it comes to the Green River Killer. In fact, we actually just launched a new tour this year called the How to Murder Tour, which talks about Seattle's most notorious killers and crime scenes. So we do talk about that as well. But I'm trying to think any cases where, yes, in fact, now the one case came to my mind. Not very well known, but it was definitely a very interesting case. Gosh, I'm trying to think, how long ago was this? This was about maybe 6 years ago, maybe a little longer. But I don't know if anybody remembers, anybody local, where the grandmother took a gun and shot her family. She shot up her family. She killed, I believe, 4 of her family members, one being her son. Just one day, she just pulled out a gun and just started shooting everybody in the house. And this actually happened in Seattle. And it was interesting because shortly, exactly 1 month later after that happened, and it was all over the news, the family contacted us and wanted us to do an investigation. Now, for me, this was a difficult case because, I'm thinking, why would they want a paranormal investigation right after they're still dealing with all of this stuff? You're still in the grieving process. I'm thinking this can't be a good thing. But they brought up the fact that before their grandmother did this, she had been isolating herself in her bedroom. I mean, to the point where she would only leave to go to the bathroom. She had a little cooker in her room. She had her own little fridge. And they also claimed that they believed that she was possessed when she did this act. The thing is they also claim that the house itself had an interesting history. They say that there was a young man that lived in the house before they moved in that actually tried to strangle his girlfriend to death. They also, said that, their uncle who lived in the house, he committed suicide in the house, in the room that the mother was living in. Now, unfortunately, we're not able to interview the grandmother because she, killed herself right after she took the gun to herself after she killed, the members of the family. Well, they also said, for a woman who's never held a gun in her life, was so precise in eliminating, her family members. It wasn't a bunch of misses. It was direct, kills. And they claim that she had this strength that she's never had before. Now, they want us to do an investigation. And the reason why they want us to do this investigation is because they're also getting ready to move out of the house. So if we want this opportunity, we got to jump on it now. So I agreed. I said, okay, let's see what's going on here. So, we went to the house where this all happened. Now, again, this is a month later after it happened. So the house has actually been cleaned up. They've replaced the carpets. They've actually painted the walls. So you wouldn't know what had happened in this house. Now, one of the things that I do with my team is I keep my team in the cold. They are not allowed to know where they're investigating. The only information they are given is if it's a private home or a business and what city it takes place in. That is all. because I don't want people prejudging the investigation. And also, if you are working with somebody who could be psychic or sensitive, you don't want them to have any of that knowledge. So I brought in a psychic that I've trusted for quite some time. And again, she doesn't know where she's going. Bring her into the house. And immediately she picks up on these loud noises. She says, I keep hearing this loud popping noise is what she described, loud popping noises. And this was actually right when she was standing in the center of the room where the grandmother decided to start shooting people. Then we actually sat down that night with the family and decided to do an EVP session to see, if she is still there, because they believe that she was still there. So as soon as we sit down, with the family and we start, asking questions into the air, all of a sudden we start hearing these strange noises coming from the back room. The back room that used to be the grandmother's room. And, of course, as I tell them to continue with the EVPs, again, I'm one of those people that will go towards the noise, so I slowly get up. And I start, slowly making my way to the room because I'm trying not to disturb whatever it could be. If it's an animal, I don't want to scare it away because I need to see what's causing this noise. So I slowly start to sneak up on the room to try and figure out what that noise is. It sounds like a scratchy noise, and we're all hearing it. So as soon as I get up to the hallway where I'm looking directly into the room, it stopped. So, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to go back before they actually moved out of the house. But they did put the house up for rent again. So I'm hoping that whoever's moved into that house, maybe they might reach out to us and let us know that there still could be something going on there.
That is freaky.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the whole serial killer idea that somebody could still be in the house trying to cause anything. Did she respond to anything? Would that be a situation? I don't know if you use Ouija boards or anything for communication, or you do mention that you have a psychic that you trust. Would that be something where you try and get a little bit more in depth with the spirit?
Well, yeah, we did try. Like I said, having the family there and having the family also ask some of the questions. Because if she's still there, maybe she has a message to pass on. Maybe she wants to say, I'm sorry. I don't know. But unfortunately, we didn't get, besides those two experiences that I'm sharing with you, tonight, we didn't get anything other than that. Would it have been, more successful if we could have returned? Possibly. But unfortunately, the family, as I said, was right in the middle of moving out. So it was that one little tiny window of opportunity of being at the right place at the right time, and that's all we got. I would have loved to have the opportunity to go back and collect some more information because it was such a unique case that unless the family that's living there now is experiencing some stuff and they contact us, that's all I can go on.
Getting back to the whole fact that you are doing serial murder tours now, what's the public's response to that? Because there's a lot of people that I could see out there who would be offended by that. And I'm not a politically correct guy. I am so not politically correct, but I could see where this could trouble people.
Well, it's a tour that there is a fascination for it. So there is an audience for this type of thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be giving the tours. So it is kind of tough when you talk about victims where their families are still alive, So, that gets to be a little tough, So when you talk about the Green River Killer or, Ted Bundy, you do kind of have to walk on eggshells. But the situation is that, a lot of the cases that we talk about on this tour are, situations that have happened, long time ago. It's not just, more recent murders. We're talking about, cases that, go way back, to, 1930s or earlier. But then we also talk about Kurt Cobain, the mystery behind that. And a lot of this stuff is, we can talk about it because it is public information, as the whole mystery, behind Kurt Cobain, did she have something to do with it?
Do you think
that's
he was
still
murdered?
Something that people, I think so. I really do. I don't think she did it personally. I think she had somebody do it for her.
She turned out to be a very rich woman because of it.
Yeah, and that's another thing that was interesting, because I've watched a lot of the documentaries and stuff, and he was getting ready to leave her, and she knew it. So here's a situation where she was going to lose everything, so, okay, let's knock him off. So I really think she had somebody do it for her. If you ever watched that recent documentary, what is it, Soaked in Bleach? That was a pretty interesting one. It's definitely eye-opening, if you watch that documentary. And that was put together by the detective that she hired to investigate what happened to him.
What's funny is I have contacted about 9 or 10 people about that story to try and get them on the air. I have not got one single reply back. And usually I get replies back all the time on people wanting to talk about their subjects. But for some reason, that case, I am skunked so far. I am just skunked. I got to figure that out.
Yeah. It's well, again, it's still an active case. Well, it's still, people are still looking into what happened. I don't know if it's physically being investigated today. But, there's still a lot of people that were, around that are still alive today that, still talk about it, that still have to deal with it, that are probably even still grieving, It's very sad, what happened,
True that. It's not like Lane Staley, who we know had a big-time heroin problem, but, there's also the conspiracy behind Jimi Hendrix's death, too. If you want to look into that a little bit more, whether or not, he was getting prepared to fire his manager, and his manager apparently didn't want to let that happen. Because he knew what he had. The greatest guitar player ever goes away in just 26 months. It's amazing.
No, it's sad.
Amazing. We only got about a minute and a half left with you, my friend. This show flew by, and you know what? I'm looking at my page here, and I still got about 5 different topics that we didn't even hit tonight. I don't have time for overtime tonight, and, but, Ross, that went by way too quick, bud. Way too quick.
I hear ya.
Do me a favor. Take a minute here to break down everything that you do and where people can find information or your tours, because I want to make sure our audience, when they're in Seattle, gets to hang out with you.
Oh, I appreciate it. Definitely. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at Ross Allison Ghost Hunter. Also, you can check out my team, our website at aghost.org, and that's aghost.org. And then, of course, check out Spooked in Seattle, Spooked in Seattle Ghost Tours at spookedinseattle.com, where we take you to some of the most notorious haunted places in Seattle. And if you're lucky enough, especially on Fridays, I personally give tours. I do the deluxe tour, where I'll give you a tour of Haunted Pioneer Square, and then I will give you a tour of my museum as well. So you'll hear a lot of these stories. And, Halloween, I'm usually lecturing at colleges all over the U.S., so definitely keep an eye out. You may check your local college, and I may be lecturing out there if you're not in the Northwest area. So I'm just all over the place, and, of course, check out my latest books from my Haunted Journal, which teaches people how to journal their experiences if they're living in a haunted place. And then, of course, me and David's book, Haunted Toys. And our next book coming out, hopefully in a few months, is going to be Haunted Ships and Lighthouses. So me and David have been having a lot of fun working together. So we've worked on a series, a haunted series. So we've got a lot of stuff. And like I said, haunted sex is something we're working on as well. So we've got a lot of stuff going on.
Right on, my friend. I appreciate that. You hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. If you're listening in on our terrestrial side, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL cranked in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Get your horns up for the guitar god. Tomorrow night on the program, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, we have Ghosts of the Great White North. I will be joined by Mike Morin from Canadian Paranormal Investigations. It's going to be a lot of fun. We talk about ghost hunting in Calgary, Alberta. Lord knows they got to find some ghosts because they don't have a hockey team. I can tell you that. Anyways, don't get me on a hockey rant. It's a big week. The NHL draft is coming up. It's only 14 years until my little guy goes into the draft. No pressure, of course. If you want to follow us on social media, on Twitter, at Space Out Radio, give our Facebook page a like, Space Out Radio Show, on TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, Dave Scott SOR on Instagram. I want to thank my team as well. They get me through every single night. Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham from The Encounter Online. Kim Gandy, our Director of Business Management. Thomas McGowan Sales. Bob Davis from our great intro voice. Jolene Lammers, Web Design. Catherine James, Social Media. Paranormal Paracon Coordinator Lana Scott. Good to have you all with us. That's our team. I got music blaring in my headphones. I got to cut that out. See you, Revolution Radio. The rest of you, do me a favor. Continue to show up. Continue to hang out. Continue to chat. Continue to tweet. And continue to tell a friend, because together we will own the night. Have a good one. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home.